Tack för det. So I'll be speaking not in Icelandic, but in English. But I do speak Icelandic, so if you have questions, feel free to ask in Icelandic. So who am I? Well, my name is Magnús. Hi. I am Director of Engineering at Oracle. And just to give you a quick overview of my history. So I graduated from the University of Iceland in physics and then computer science, and went to the US and got a PhD in computer science from Brandeis University. That was 11 years ago. So for 11 years, I've been working in the IT or computer industry in the United States. First at EMC, where I spent about 7 years, then at a small company called Endeca, which was acquired by Oracle about 2 years ago or so. So 11 years, it's a long time. Now this has given me some insights into information discovery, the process of information discovery and big data, which is why I selected that as a topic. Oracle, I hope that most of you know Oracle. It's a pretty big company, about 130,000 people. And if you want to talk about the experience of working at a big company, I'll be happy to sit down with you and talk. It can be quite interesting. Endeca. So what is Endeca? Endeca is actually the company I want to talk a little bit more about, because anybody know Endeca, by the way? Nobody? Well, you've for sure used their products. So Endeca was founded about 15 years ago. And they pioneered something called guided navigation or faceted search. You may not know the concept, but I'm pretty sure you've actually used it. So what is it? Well, this is a web page from Home Depot, and I punched in washing machines. It looks familiar, I'm assuming. Now see that bar on the left-hand side? This is guided navigation or faceted search. This is the technique of taking the data and categorizing it and making it specific to the search term that you used. That you've seen before, right? Well, this is what Endeca pioneered. This is what Endeca developed all these years ago. And this is how Endeca became really the 800-pound gorilla in the e-commerce marketplace. This simple thing. So what does it actually do? What is the technique here? And how does this, by the way, relate to information discovery? So you have a washing machine. Well, it turns out washing machines have different attributes. They not only have brands and capacity and colors, they have different features. Steam wash, allergy wash. I have no idea what those features were. But just by typing in washing machine, all those features popped up and they were actually categorized. And if you look at the counts next to the brand names, this gives you an indication of how many items there are that kind of fulfill that attribute. So this is something that can actually guide your exploration of what's available. I mean, this is shopping, right? I'm assuming most of you have done some shopping online. This is what helps you figure out what you want. So the process of information discovery is in some ways similar to shopping or browsing. You have something that you want, and you're looking at all the available data to figure out how it maps what's out there, what maps to what you want. And this is a guide. So what I did, I selected GE as a brand. And this is the web page that came up. So what I've done now is I've filtered my navigation state down to just looking at washing machines made by GE. And what's interesting is that all these other attributes have now been narrowed down and showing you just stuff that's related to GE. Now these attributes, this is something that you can kind of pop. You can select multiple attributes and it'll always recalculate everything from scratch and show you just the stuff that you're actually that you've selected. So what's the benefit of this? Well, the benefit is that this allows you this kind of exploration of the data. hence the term, guided navigation. So, information discovery. What is information discovery in general? It's looking at zeros and ones, I guess sevens according to this slide, and trying to extract the valuable information from the data itself. So how would you do that? If let's say that you were a manager at a company that manufactures some sort of gadgets. Now, suddenly there's a big sales spike in the Northeast. Why? How can you tell why that happens? All your traditional BI infrastructure tells you exactly what happened. Yes, it tells you that the sales of this gadget went significantly higher in that region. It tells you maybe the salespeople, but it doesn't tell you why. So, anybody? How would you answer that question, that general question? Anybody want to take a guess? You're quiet. Well, one approach, maybe not the best approach, maybe the best approach, I don't know, but this is at least the approach that Oracle and Decca is taking. One approach is to find data, find new data that you may not have captured already. Add the data, ask new questions, and then use the new patterns to get some insights to what's happening. Sounds straightforward, right? You're basically starting a conversation between you and the data, adding data, asking questions, and then trying to see new patterns. But this is an iterative thing. You don't do it just once. You do it again and again, continually adding new data, trying to discover the valuable information that the data may have. Now, Oracle and Decca takes really a two-pronged approach. So we talked about the e-commerce aspect. So Decca started in e-commerce, then about 5-6 years ago, they said, well, this thing can be used for general information discovery. Let's do that. And the company was effectively cut in half. One company continued to pay the bills, and the other company was now tasked with taking that same infrastructure, that key piece of technology that allows you to kind of explore and navigate the data and tackle this new market of information discovery. Using the same approach, we added another prong, so in this two-pronged approach. One was the exploration, and the second prong was allowing the user to ask complex questions. So how do you ask complex questions of data? Well, you use some sort of structured query language like SQL. And that's what we did. That was the information discovery platform that Oracle and Decca provides. Navigate the data in real time and ask questions in real time. That's why this conversation piece is important. I mean, it's not really much of a conversation if you ask a question and then you get the answer, say, 5 hours later. It doesn't really lend itself to this iterative approach that is needed. Finding the new data, that's interesting. This is something that shows the value of taking two disparate and different data sources and mashing them up. You may have heard the term data mashup. This is, well, mashup in general is a pretty well-known term. You know the Beatles' White Album, I assume. This is from the completely different industry, music industry. So you have the Beatles' White Album, you have Jay-Z's Black Album, and then a guy came along and made the Gray Album. We basically took the music from both albums and kind of mashed them up. And what's interesting is that this album was a brand new sound. It added new value. So just by taking two different things and mashing them up, you can get new value. And this example, it's actually taken from Tim Berners-Lee TED Talk about open data. This is something that the Cedar Grove Institute in the US did. They took municipal data, public data, from the town of Zanesville in Ohio about the water lines in the city. They took that data and then they took the census data from the United States government about kind of ethnicity in Zanesville, and they did a mashup. So what does this show you? Well, I think it's kind of interesting. It shows you the areas where you have mostly white people live versus the areas where non-white people live, and it overlays that with the water line in the town. Doesn't seem fair, right? But you can only get this data by taking these two seemingly independent sources and overlaying them. So this challenge of finding the right data sources, finding interesting data sources, is something that will continue from now on, basically. We're just getting started in this data mashup thing. Okay, by the way, there's no good slide without, or good presentation without at least one picture of a cat. I put this in here just to make sure that everybody's aware. I'm now switching gears. So I've been talking about information discovery, this iterative approach to making that connection from raw data to valuable insights that you can act upon with trends. I'm going to talk about 4 macro trends. And these are trends that will be really prevalent over the next decade or so, and trends that both analysts and industry leaders have identified. I'm assuming that most of you will be quite familiar with those trends. The first one is cloud computing or cloud services. The idea that you can not only get services, but data through well-defined APIs from a cloud provider. This is really game-changing. You can have startup companies that require no infrastructure. They just kind of lease on demand from the cloud. It's a perfect thing for a small company that's kind of bootstrapping itself. And what's even greater, that it's also perfect for big companies, for established companies. Because there typically comes a point when it's not worthwhile buying services from the cloud for a big company, where it actually makes fiscal sense to have your own internal infrastructure. But if it's cloud enabled, if it's accessed, like if you were accessing a cloud, a public cloud, call it a private cloud, if you're accessing your data in this private cloud, you can actually have a hybrid scheme where you size your cloud and your infrastructure towards average use. So to deal with those spikes, all you have to do is you fall over to the public cloud. So it could be this is the hybrid cloud approach. So this is quite dramatic for running a corporation. Mobile computing. Now, how many of you have smartphones? And how many of you actually looked at it during this presentation? A lot. Good. No, I hear you. I'm the guy giving the presentation. I was kind of tempted to look at it myself. So I get it. Mobile computing, that's another game changer, because now you have data available at your fingertips at any point in time. It's really an extension of yourself. If I'm shopping, maybe it's just me, but if I'm shopping in a store and I see the price of something that I like, I typically go on Amazon and check the price there. And if it's cheaper, well, let me buy it online. If I'm looking at a restaurant or maps, I never look at a map in a book anymore. I always do it in my cell phone. I don't even check to know where I'm going before I head out. I just trust that I can Google it and find it. So we now have these 2 trends. We have the cloud computing, which allows the data to be accessed everywhere, and we have mobile computing, which allows us to access the data everywhere. You take those 2 trends and you add the 3rd trend, which is the Internet of Things. I think there was an ad for this conference showing an idea what the future could look like with kind of internet-enabled gadgets. Well, the future is here and now. It's not really the future, it's right now. So this is an example that I took. This is the Nest thermostat. Anybody heard of it? Good. This is a company founded by Tony Fidel, the guy who designed the iPads, the number of generations iPads with Apple. And you can kind of tell the Apple influence on this gadget. I have it at home, and it's actually phenomenal. It's a sensor, it's a thermostat that controls the heating and cooling in your house, and it's internet enabled, so it can actually go online and figure out, well, what's the weather like today? It learns the way you like it. So if you say wake up at 7 a.m., and typically you set the temperature to, I apologize, 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I've been in the US for too long, so 70 some degrees Fahrenheit, 20 something Celsius maybe. It learns, so it knows that, oh, this guy wakes up at 8, therefore I'll start heating maybe half an hour earlier, so when he gets up, it'll be that temperature. It knows that when you leave, the temperature should go down. And it not only knows that by the way you set it, it knows it by it detecting that you're not at home. They also produce smoke and smoke detectors, which are interconnected and interlinked with this guy. So they use that as a sensor to also know if you're at home or not. So this technology, this Internet of Things, it's right here, it's right now. And it'll just get more amazing. With the amount of sensors we have, pressure sensors, heat sensor, temperature sensor, this will be really prevalent. It was in 2008 that we kind of crossed the threshold, that we had more connected devices than we had number of people on Earth. 2011, we had about 9 billion of those, and 2020, we'll have, well, the more conservative estimates say 24 billion. Cisco, which I admit has a stake in the game, is estimated around 50 billion connected devices. And these things will be generating a stream of data, continuous stream of data, which kind of leads to the fourth trend. But before I get there, let me talk about, I found this instance of Internet of Things really compelling. Smart parking. So last year there was an Internet of Things World Forum in Barcelona. And the city of Barcelona and Cisco put kind of a prototype in play. What they did is that they embedded sensors in the concrete of parking spaces. So this basically detected if there was a car parked in that parking space. What they then did is they built an application for commuters to know exactly what parking spaces are available right now. An IBM study showed that about 30% of traffic in big metropolitan cities is because of parking. 30% of the traffic that could be fixed by just using a smart app with kind of smart enabled parking. So this is kind of the first order benefit of embedding sensors. The second order benefit could be that now the cities can actually plan their cities differently based on the traffic patterns. And the capitalist in me could actually go in further and say that they could now have variable pricing depending on availability. Yeah, not that we would ever do that here in Iceland, no. So the fourth trend, big data. What have I got to say about big data? Anybody here not know what big data is? How do you define big data, by the way? Do you use 3 V's or 4 V's? Who uses 3 V's? Everybody uses 4? But do you know what I'm talking about with 3 V's and 4 V's? Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So I think it was IBM that started by defining big data with 3 V's. Volume, which basically means that you have large data sets. Currently, we have companies that are actually processing per day. They're doing computations on petabytes, some number of petabytes of data per day. That's a lot of data. Volume, velocity, which kind of gels pretty well with the previous slide where you have these sensors continuously streaming data. But it's not just sensors, right? You have social media where you have those billions of people actually typing what they did today. And in addition to that, you have processes. You actually have computer processes that are doing some computation. So all this means you have a lot of data streaming in continuously. And you want to do some computations on that data. The third V, anybody want to guess? You had volume, you had velocity, and you have variety. Because you have the data coming from different sources, so it's wildly different. And if you're in the mentality of the data warehouse, where you do kind of this upfront modeling before you put it into a structured Oracle database, but of course, that's not the way things work in big data. You just land the data. It's like a big bag of data. It's just a file system, typically HDFS. You just land the data, and you do the modeling on an ad hoc basis afterwards. So that is a fundamental change how big companies can run their IT. I have no idea if this is secret or not, so don't take it further. Toyota has started an initiative. They started with a big data initiative. But then people said, well, the data I'm working with isn't really that big. It's only a few Excel spreadsheets. I shouldn't put it in this big data bucket that you provide for me. So they renamed it. It's now called All Data Initiative, just to make clear that everybody should put their data in there. And then afterwards, they can do whatever processing that they want. We're generating 2.5 quintillion bytes per day, or 2.5 exabytes. So exabytes is 10 to the power of 18 per day now. And interestingly enough, less than 1% of that, I think, Stefan, you mentioned that as well, less than 1% is actually analyzed. So whoever comes with the tooling to do this analysis, well, of course, it'll be Oracle, but of course. But whoever comes with tooling, that's a really huge market. And if you want to kind of probe for market weaknesses, all you have to do is just count the number of startups. And in all those 4 industrial areas, you have a large number of startups popping up. So, in conclusion, what have I talked about? Well, I've talked about that we are entering an era where we have really a superstorm. It's really a superstorm. The fact that we are generating a lot of data, the fact that people now have really proper access to it through well-defined APIs, that they can consume it at any point, any time of the day. It means that if your company, if you're running a startup, if you're not aligning yourself with those 4 factors, you're missing out. So back to information discovery. So how would you do information discovery on big data? Well, the idea is you do it the same way as before, through this iterative approach of exploring the data, asking questions, looking at the insights, and rinse and repeat. The really tricky part, and this is no small thing, the really tricky part is making it be interactive. Because being interactive at small data set is easy. Being interactive at petabytes or zettabytes, that's hard. That's really hard. And that's the project we're working on now and tackling. So the e-commerce solution was kind of this one-pronged approach of doing information discovery through exploration. The second prong that we added was allowing you to use structured language to actually ask your questions. And now the third prong we're adding is machine learning, doing statistical analysis of the data itself to help you, to guide you, to kind of give voice to the data, allowing it to speak for itself. Because we're human, most of us at least, which means that we'll make mistakes. We'll look over here where the interesting parts are over there. So using the computer to kind of help you out, to guide you, is, I think, a key part in really being able to do information discovery in the era of big data. Thank you.
Spurningar á íslensku?
Eða ensku, það líka í lagi.
Já, eða ensku, já. Já, gjör svo vel.
Það góð spurning. Jú, Endeca og Oracle Endeca voru keyptir raun og veru fyrir þá features sem eru í prótótipum til þess að díla við unstructured data. Og leiðin sem við tökum raun og veru mjög einföld. Annars vegar erum við með raun og veru leitarindex, þannig að þetta svolítið eins og sambland af strúkturum gagnagrunni og bara leitarvél. Og þá þetta raun og veru mappa bæði þessi óstruktúruðu gögn og struktúruðu gögnin og það þetta tengja þau saman að því þetta raun og veru indexerað í sama gagnagrunni. Það ein leið. Hin leiðin að nota, við kallum það enrichments, það sem við tökum gögnin og auðgum þau. Þess við notum, gerum til dæmis semantic analysis á gögnunum til þess að reyna að skilja þetta jákvætt eða neikvætt sentiment. Annað dæmi að við notum gervigreind eða machine learning til þess að svona tína út þemu sem í þessum óstruktúraða texta. Þemu og setningar. Þannig að þú getur á mjög auðveldan máta að fengja að vita sirka bát á mjög háu leveli hvað verið að tala í þessu skjali. Jú, það rétt hjá þér. Það verður mun mikilvægara í þessum heimi gríðar gagna að geta unni bæði með struktúruð og óstruktúruð gögn.
Þá þökkum við Magnús kærlega fyrir skemmtilegan fyrirlestur. Þá næst.
Takk fyrir.
Þá næst að bjóða upp á svið Þorbjörgu Kjartansdóttir. Hún ætlar hjá lýsasamtökunum, hún ætlar að fjalla landupplýsingar í nýju ljósi. Þorbjörg framkvæmdastjóri lýsusamtaka landupplýsingar á Íslandi. Þorbjörg með BS-gráðu í landafræði frá Háskóla Íslands og mastersgráðu frá Kaupmannahafnarháskóla í skipulagsfræðum og byggingalandsfræði. Þorbjörg aðjúnkt í land- og ferðamálafræði Háskóla Íslands. Gjörðu svo vel. Já, takk.